can go in, have a funny 5 minutes if they want to. They can have a laugh with each other. They can sit and have a cry. They can support each other. So the Wobble Rooms, I think they were first pioneered, might have been in Bradford somewhere, I think. We have a lot of that on the Academy of Fabulous Stuff, a lot of examples of Wobble Rooms where staff can go and try and decompress during their day.
Yeah, and it's interesting in Sandwell District General Hospital as well. I know if any of you are interested, you can access our workforce wellbeing guide that we've just published. But at Sandwell, they have a sanctuary, as they call it, where you can go and get a whole range of therapies and kindness to just help you take a short break and put your mind into a different place for a few minutes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's about what you can actually do in the workplace. You can make sure that there's a hot meal available for everybody 24/7. I mean, that's another big thing. Some of the catering departments have really pulled all the stops out to do that proper catering. I mean, always there's weekend catering for frontline staff. How many times have we heard criticisms about that? But the really well-run trusts are making sure that people have got somewhere they can go and have a rest away from the front line. They've got somewhere where they can have a decent hot meal if they want one, or a snack if they want one, but access to a food. And keeping hydrated, of course, PPE is just such a sweaty experience. But it's about making the workplace as comfortable as you can in the circumstances. Also, it's about, I think there's a thing called a Schwartz round. Now, nurses that are with us tonight will maybe be familiar with the Schwartz round, and it's where everyone who's involved in a patient's care can sit down and discuss the patient and discuss whether or not they're making the right decisions. It's quite a well-known technique. There's a spin-off technique to that where people at the end of their shift, and I know everybody wants to strip off and get home, but if you can take 10 or 15 minutes for that group in that ward in that shift to spend 10 or 15 minutes with each other, just talking about the day, talking about the things that were emotional, talking about the things that went wrong, and talking about the things that went right. So they share the day and the emotions, and they say, how did you feel about that? And someone just bursts into tears, or they don't. I mean, who knows? But it's that ability just to share that tension at the end of the day before you go home. The decompression needs to take place before you go home.
Yeah, Dr. David Knott writes very well about it. I don't know whether you've read his book War Doctor.
No.
About his experiences working with Médecins Sans Frontières and other charity organizations. I mean, he's the most extraordinary character, and he talks about that the importance at the end of particularly difficult times of getting together with the people who've experienced it with you and just talking, sharing the experience, and using that as a means of decompressing before you go and try to do something else.
Yeah.
Can I just talk? I'd just like to kind of expand that aspect of the conversation we're having into this issue around the domestic environment and the extent to which the domestic environment, if we're not careful, can inform our behavior in the work environment as well. And we've heard a lot about it recently, where people are very concerned about the impact on their own well-being that looking after children in the domestic environment is having, the homeschooling requirements that are being put on people is having, that, for example, if a partner is struggling with furlough, has lost their job, and there's money worries and there's arguments, around sort of relationships and so on. There's a lot going on in the home as well that it's easy to forget about when we just focus on what's going on in the workplace. Have you got any observations there, Roy?
Yes, I have. I had an email, and if you just give me 2 seconds, because I can pull it up.
It was Sarah, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes, and I'm just going to find it for you. Hang on a minute. Here it is. Right now, I'm going to read you something. Right, forgive me while I do this, but I hope you'll all enjoy this. I wrote a piece the other day talking about working from home. And I did it in the context of an old white bloke, working from home, which is what I am. And I ended up handing out, I think it was 5 tips on working from home. And the next day, I got this wonderful email from Sarah, and it was so good. I rang her up and said, because she gave me a ticking off, really. I said, "This is so good, Sarah. Do you mind if I publish it?" And I published it. She said, "Of course." And I published it the next day, and I think it's had something like 8,000 downloads since it's been up there. And let me just take a moment, John, if you don't mind, to
Yeah,
read.
go ahead.
Okay.
Just while you do that, Roy, to the rest of you watching, if you've got any questions at all, put them in the chat function and we will get to them. We're going to finish this at about 8 o'clock, so we've got plenty of time. Anything at all. It doesn't necessarily have to be workforce well-being related. It could be something that you've read that Roy's written, or it might be an experience that you'd like to share from within St Helens and Knowsley. Anything goes tonight. It's open house. Ask whatever you like. Roy, have you found it?
Oh, I found it. Yes. Okay, here we go. Dear Roy, I always read your newsletters with interest, but I did feel compelled to answer your rhetorical question about what happened in lockdown and how I'll remember it. I'll be saying something different to your suggestions of enjoying the ordered calm. I mean, I don't know why I wrote that. It was just such a stupid thing to write. Anyway, here she goes. She said, like me and thousands of other NHS back office workers, we don't qualify for school places if we can work from home. Our homework is not 8 hours in a dedicated office corner. It's 8 hours, if we're lucky, scattered across 16 interspersed with school Zoom chats or letting a child play on CBeebies vaguely educational sites so you can make an uninterrupted call the old-fashioned way by phone. Will I get on top of my diet, sleep better? Not a hope. I'm trying to write a report on 4 hours sleep because my 5-year-old has picked up that the virus is particularly dangerous to Granny and is up with nightmares. I'm trying to evaluate service improvement with a crying 2-year-old on my hip, and she's on my hip because I'm desperately trying to keep her out of the kitchen cupboards. She's crying, really wants to be in that cupboard, and because she doesn't understand why I won't let her have noisy toys right now. I'm mostly eating cake as the only thing that's keeping me conscious enough to look like an adult from mid-shoulder up on Zoom. There's no question of a lovely walk around the block commute because getting 2 small children dressed and out on a walk is a serious palaver. And if I'm going to that much effort, we're certainly not going to stay out long enough to pretend it's an educational trip to look for wildlife. That's something else. It's not just a cute toddler staggering into Zoom. It's a cute toddler staggering into my room all night because they're unsettled. The cute toddler waking her brother, both of them demanding enough snacks to keep a small cafe in business, both of them crying, one of them needing someone to talk them through phonics, bullying them into handwriting and get them to draw a card for the school lonely people needs card thing and teach them how to use coins for maths, even though I've not used cash since roughly April. So, Mr. Lilley, it is all very different.
Well, I just think that is a sensational and if I may say, it's a brilliant riposte to you.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
who are any of us lucky enough to have a home office? Who are any of us to comment on the trials and tribulations of the average working man or woman who trying to work from home in a standard domestic environment and juggle those things? Has anybody got any comment they'd like to make in that regard? Do please feel free to switch off mute, chime in. What do you think of Sarah's comment? Is that your experience, or has Sarah got it wrong? And actually, yeah, you've got to find a way to go out and get some exercise and put the kids to sleep for a few hours. If you think of something, chime in with it. I'll just give you a couple of moments to be brave enough to come off mute if you want to. All right, nobody's brave enough, Roy. So, next question. How do you think we can maintain the current momentum of support from the public in the face of other external challenges once COVID diminishes?
You know,
Great question, Claire. Thank you.
that's a really interesting, or was that from Claire? That's a really good question. I mean, if you look back, there was a kind of a spontaneity, wasn't there, about the support? Think about the Thursday evenings when we all went out and clattered saucepans and banged. I must tell you, I'm based live in Surrey. It's in a very quiet part of Surrey, and I left there and I'm now living in London, and I've been up here for the duration. And the first Thursday evening that I was here, I suddenly heard this great clattering noise. I thought, what in the hell's the name of that? So I went out on the balcony, and everywhere was lit up. And people were out there banging saucepans together. I mean, I'd completely forgotten about it. And suddenly it dawned on me what it was about. There was a huge spontaneity. And Thursday after Thursday after Thursday, people came out and they did it again and again and again. Of course, in the end, it came to an end. And I think that it's a shame that it's come to an end, but I think it was very reassuring for the people working so hard in the front line of the NHS to know the public were really behind them. I think the next big thing that's happened is the vaccine rollout. That's been managed and run by the NHS. Unlike poor old Dido Harding trying to sort out test and trace or tickle and chuckle or whatever it's called, I don't know, which has been cobbled together by the private sector, and it's still really, quite a difficult thing to manage. The vaccine rollout was organised by the NHS. Boom, it's done, and the public are in awe of the fact that the NHS has rolled it out so efficiently, and everybody, I don't know anybody who's not been satisfied with the experience of their vaccination, and so there's this mounting huge admiration for the NHS. One, as we said earlier, I hope it will mean that a lot more people will come and want to work in the NHS. That's for sure. And secondly, I think there is a lot of sympathy for the NHS, and it will carry on for a long time. Except, and this is where I think it will start to break down, and it will be over waiting times. I think once MPs' inboxes get full of people saying, my wife needs a hip operation, she's in terrible pain and she's on a 5-year waiting list, that's when things will start to get difficult. And that's when the NHS has got to be really very honest about what it can do and what it can't. I think we should start managing expectations now. I think we should say, once the last patient with COVID has left ITU, we are still going to be in a mess. We are still going to have staff that will need to take some leave. We're still going to have waiting lists all the time because, I think I read, I think it was the Nuffield Trust who said that the way in which, if we start with 4.5 million people on a waiting list, the way in which that's compounding at about 500,000, we will end up, it'll take 5 years to try and get back to something like normal. I think it's waiting times that will test the patience of the public. And the way to manage that is for the NHS to be very honest. Now, that's not just the NHS. That's not somebody in Whitehall being honest about it. This is about hospitals like this one communicating with their local communities and say, firstly, writing to individuals, you're on the waiting list. We have a huge waiting list. We're doing our best to get to you. We'll let you know how you get on. Then write to them again and say, we still can't give you. We might, you've got to keep in touch with the people on the waiting list. Give them some hope. And you've got to keep in touch with the local communities through the local TV. Bring the local TV in, bring the local radio stations in and explain why it is so difficult to reduce the waiting times. And communicate with the local newspapers as well, because local newspapers still have a big pull in a lot of communities. And it's a job as well for the non-executive directors on the board to manage what we call external boundaries. They should be out doing evening chats with the local golf club, the Women's Royal Voluntary Service, Probus, all of that when we can get back into doing face-to-face things. The non-executive directors have got to get out on the external boundaries and explain the situation that the hospital is in. we don't want to say to people we can't manage. We want to say we can manage, but it's going to take time. This is what we're doing. This is what the league tables are looking like. And so communications is really important.
Yeah, and it's been so difficult for any NHS or social care organisation to do that in the past, telling it how it is, being open and honest with your local community, working in tandem with the news and media organisations to be open and transparent about what you're doing, has often been frowned upon, where perhaps a central function is saying, oh, we've got to be careful how we manage this politically, you've got to be very careful about what you say and so on. And I'm with you, Roy. I think we're at the stage where actually we jettison that modus operandi, and instead we take the public into our confidence.
Yes.
We tell them how it is,
yes.
And we do that intelligently and openly. Is that fair?
I mean, I don't think I'm telling tales out of school, but there was a bus stop a couple of months ago between the comms leads at NHS England and the local trusts. The local trusts were all being pressured by local and regional news agencies to say, let us come in. We want to see, just how bad it is. The thought at the centre, I think, really influenced by the Department of Health, it's not so much NHS England, was we don't really want the public to know what it's like and how bad it is. And, we want them to think we're managing elegantly and it's all going to be all right. And there were very few fly on the walls or people actually, I mean, we had Hugh Pym from the BBC who did a couple of bits in some of the hospitals in London. And I remember saying to the people at NHS England, look, people want to hear what's happening in their areas, told by reporters with the same regional accent that they've got, telling it like it is where they live. They don't want Hugh Pym at some London teaching hospital. And over time, that has changed and it's freed it up. And now there's a lot more regional news. We're hearing a lot more about what is happening around England and not just, St Thomas's Hospital in London or the UCLH or something like that. So quite a lot of that has been loosened up. And I'm very pleased to see it as well. We've got some terrific comms leads in our hospitals. They're real professionals.
I'll tell you what, it's almost as if you knew that Kim had just come on the call. It's just extraordinary.
Kim, good evening. I'm talking about you.
It's an extraordinary ability that you've got to spot her name appearing. But
well, we have some great comms leads around the country, and there's no question that they're perfectly capable of managing local news in a sensible way. And I'm rather pleased that I think that NHS England comms and the Department of Health, or the DH press office, really have come to their senses and they've loosened a lot of that up.
Yeah, but I think that should continue long after COVID. I think
yes,
that's
I do. Well, that was the point you were making, John. I agree that now we've kind of set that precedent and we can show that we can do things on a local and regional basis. We must carry on that, and that's really, really important. I'm saying this for Kim because she might have not heard me say it, that when we start managing waiting list expectations, which is the next big challenge, it's very important that there's a really good connection with the community.
Okay, let's move on. We've got Elaine has asked a really pertinent and tragic question, really, which is we've all seen and heard comments. We've all seen and heard comments from COVID deniers. Don't worry about the spelling, Elaine, that's fine. How do you respond to them? Because they really annoy me. I think everybody would chime in with that.
I just think they're bonkers. Yeah, I was on, I think it was on Talk Radio, and they had some nutter on there talking, and I just said to him, look, if you don't have a vaccine, that's fine. But how do you know you don't have COVID without having a test? How do you know you're not spreading it around? And even if you do have a vaccine or you don't, you're still going to spread it around. We have got to respect lockdown and the reasons for it. And there's nothing that these people can say that has any logic to any of it. I just blank it now. I don't watch it. If it's on social media, I just block them and I just ignore it. And occasionally, if I have to talk about it, I will. But fundamentally, there's that old phrase, isn't there, about giving people the oxygen of publicity. And, I just don't give them the oxygen.
Well, I think that's perfectly sensible advice, if I may say. Although I do understand it must be awful to be coming off duty and seeing people in car parks and foyers and so on, just acting in this ludicrous manner. And
Yeah,
I take
it
my hat off, but I think Roy's right. If you can ignore them, that's the only way. They're
uh,
just, they want TV cameras, they want confrontation, and if you deny them that, then they have no platform.
the more you have a row with him on the forecourt of the hospital, the more they love it. I just, I just walk out and think, you know what, I may be seeing you on the forecourt of our hospital tonight, but what are you going to do when I see you in ICU next week?
Great answer. Okay, right. We've got Claire has got a question. She says, our speakers earlier this week have compared NHS staff efforts to levels of elite performance. We're doing so much to thank and support them to maintain this with small tokens and gestures and donations from the public. Do you think frontline staff will be rewarded in some way as we start to recover from COVID before we revert back to issues around waiting times and resources?
That's a great question, isn't it? I mean, the small things are the big things. That's one of the phrases that we've been tagged with over
Well,
the
we
years.
had, if I can just interrupt your response, because we had that great example from Newcastle hospitals of the mugged scheme.
Yeah,
Perhaps you could explain what that is, Roy.
yeah. It was Dame
Dame Jackie.
Dame Jackie, that's right, her hospital. They were mugging their staff. You think, oh, really? What they were doing is they got mugs with kind of a thank you thing written on the mug. And inside there was a sachet for making a hot chocolate. There was a perfume. There was a bar of nice soap. There was a face towel. There was some wet wipes. I mean, they stuffed these mugs. They're quite big, full of really nice things. And they just appeared indiscriminately around the hospital. You'd go to the loo and come back, and you'd be mugged on your desk, or you'd walk away from the nursing station and come back and they'd be mugged. And the staff had great fun in giving these mugs to each other.
And if I may, the real secret of it is the recipient is then asked to replenish the mug and pass it on to another member of staff to share the positivity and to share the kindness and the love. And I think that's such a delightful sort of self-fulfilling sort of a route to happiness. I like it.
Exactly. To come back to the question,
Forgive me, I interrupted.
Small things are the big. There's no such thing as a small thing, because the closer you get to a small thing, the bigger it is. It might be a small thing for you. I should never forget Terry, Dr. Terry Porritt, who runs the Academy of Fabulous Stuff, tells the story of when she was on a ward with a cancer patient. She had a very dry mouth, and she went down and bought a lollipop, I think it was, John, and she tells that story.
Exactly.
And she bought this lolly for, I don't know, like tuppence, and brought it back, and and to kind of help the woman's mouth, and she ended up with a really beautiful thank you letter for that she still kept after all these years. So it is the small things that are the big things. How do we reward staff? Well, look, I mean, the elephant in the room is a pay rise, isn't it? The government will, I think, wriggle off the pay rise for nurses and probably doctors because they have the pay review bodies. And so they are bound by statute to take account of what the pay review bodies say. Now, I know there have been instances in the past when Jeremy Hunt was the Secretary of State for Health that he didn't take because of the austerity provisions, they didn't do it. But I think my view is that whilst there is mounting pressure for paying something, I mean, politically, I think it would be very wise to pay every frontline member of staff who's been, or all members of staff who've worked through COVID, some kind of tax-free gratuity, or even if the government said, okay, this month's salary will be tax-free. I think it would be nice, in inverted commas, if there were a gesture of that nature. We do know that people won't be losing their leave if they can't take it all in the annual calendar. They can roll it forward. Though God knows how, with the shortage of staff, people are going to take extended leave. I really don't know. But I think, I don't want it to sound patronizing, but what is the one thing that you can do every day that we all forget to do is to say thank you. And, you know, for senior people in the organization, chief executives particularly, to get out. I mean, if I was running a hospital and I was still the chairman, I would take I'd take the chief executive's desk out into the middle of the car park and set fire to it. I think, right, nobody has a desk, everybody manages on the hoof, and I want to see everybody out in the trust. And to go out and I have a little saying that is, there's a back that needs patting, go and find it. And I think that's really important.
I remember there's I'm trying to remember his name now. Leo Buscaglia. Leo Buscaglia says, too often we underestimate the power of a touch, a smile, a kind word, a listening ear, an honest compliment, or the smallest act of caring, all of which has the potential to turn a life around. And that's where we got the tiny noticeable things motto from within the academy. And I think those words still ring true. So there we are. Diana asks, what do you make of the changes being heralded reversing the 2012 Health and Social Care Act? What should we look out for?
Diana,
and I think that's the key, is what should we look out for?
I am breaking out the champagne. I wept tears.
No fans of Lansley here, I think it's fair to say.
I wept tears of anguish when this lot came out first time round, and now I'm weeping tears of joy. I can't believe we're finally going to scrape Lansley off our boots, and we can get back to trying some organisation of running. Okay, what can we expect? Social care. Working much more closely with social care. There is a room for local government on the ICSs. Now, this is very important. Now, I had a joke with somebody just recently where I said I'd run an ICS, and they said, where? In America? And I said, no, 30 years. It was called 30 years ago. It's called a district health authority. The model that's emerging is very close to a district health authority. If anybody here tonight knows what one of those is, it's like an intermediate level of management. And there was a place around the table for all of the key stakeholders. And that's what ICSs are trying to do. So there's working together with local government is now, it will be enshrined in law in the ICSs. Secondly, it's pooled budgets. Now, the difficulty's always been that the government votes money to various departments of health and social care. So social care money is voted on by the Treasury, and it has to be spent on social care. Similarly, health. You can't spend health money on social care and vice versa. Now, that was very difficult. Now, we had to unpick that, and that was unpicked through what they call the Better Care Fund, Section 75, if there's anybody from the finance department watching, and it enabled health money and social care money to be pooled and spent jointly. So we could spend health money or social care money to the benefit of residents, patients, carers, families. You know, it made a lot of sense. Those pooling arrangements are being extended in the new arrangements that are heralded in the leaked document that came out over the weekend. That is very good news. In addition to that, there's quite a big mention about data, and the Secretary of State is taking powers to make sure, I mean, in simple terms, to make sure that the data is shared between health and social care, and it's accessible throughout the system. That means that discharged people in hospitals can have a look at Mrs. Brown's care package to see what was in it, is it still running, and how does it need to be changed. And it means that social services can have a look at Mrs. Brown's medical records to make sure that the carers are giving her her meds at the right time and they're the right meds. And it means that when somebody collapsed comes in, you know, the poor old junior doctor at 1 o'clock in the morning in A&E can actually access somebody's health record and figure out what's going on. So those are the three big ticket items that I think will make the biggest change on the ground. There are other things as well. We're dumping competition. I'm sorry for people working in CCGs and all the hard work they put in over the years, but we're not going to see stuff going out to competition as of right now. We're still told that the NHS can go out to competition if they want to, and the private sector can bid for work if it wants to, but on the same basis as any other private contractor. So they'll simply say, we're approved by the CQC, we can do this work and we want to bid for it. You don't have to, there's no presumption anymore. So we're going back to, if you remember, the any qualified provider thing that some of you may remember. So really, I think pretty much everything that is in the proposed act is to be welcomed. The question is, and Jonathan Ashworth was asking it tonight, he did a press release tonight saying, why do we need to change the NHS at a time like this? Well, I think the answer to that question is because it's a time like this. These are mainly structural changes that are already in place. People are already working what they call in common, where they can't work actually in concert legally. The ICSs are well underway. I think everybody's reorganizing themselves ready for this. It's long overdue. And I think that as far as the legal changes are concerned, it'll get a fair wind in Parliament. At second reading, I expect Labour will kick up a fuss, but fundamentally this should go through. And I'm really pleased. I mean, I'm no fan of Boris Johnson. I think people must realise that. But the fact that he's prepared to do this is interesting. I mean, we knew that when he was the Mayor of London, he wanted to take on the healthcare of Londoners, but David Cameron wouldn't let him in the Lansley reforms. But I think, as much as I'm critical of Bojo, he does get health. There's no question about it. And there's a little known secret that I guess we can tell everybody, that actually Sir Simon Stevens and Bojo were at Eton together. They were at the same school and they're old mates and they get on very well. So if we can't
say, Roy, every time you say that,
yeah,
you kind of reveal it as some kind of great secret, but you must have told it to about 20,000 people by now.
I've never told anybody before, John. You know that. I'm not one to gossip. And so I think that Bojo does get health. I know he thinks that Lansley reforms were bonkers, and I think this is our last best opportunity to kick some sense into the system.
I'm just going to pick up on Diana's comment, and she may not have meant it like this, but is there anything, perhaps not even in the repeal of the Health and Social Care Act, is there anything we ought to be on the lookout for over the coming year or two, do you think? Is there anything that's coming out, do you think, that might be difficult, challenging for NHS and social care to get to grips with and do well?
I don't. I really don't, John. I think what COVID has done has shown that people, if you get out of their way, they can work together, and they work together very well. And people won't want to go back now. There is no going back for this, and people won't want to do it. So no, I'm not. I mean, I think the only concern I have is not so much on the Labour benches, but on the Tory benches, because there are quite a few Conservative backbenchers who voted for the Lansley reforms, and now they're going to have to stuff their face with a big portion of a humble pie and wash it down with whatever it is they're going to wash it down with. But they're going to have to eat humble pie to vote for this. I suspect they just will disappear and vote as required.
Okay, well, David's come in with a wonderful question. He says, to you, Roy, you're a great advocate of getting best practice shared, your helpful academy portal. What do you see are the barriers we need to overcome to ensure we reduce the variations we see across the NHS? And David, if I may, it might be, if we want to expand upon that, the variations that we see across the country, rich v poor, for example, you know, the social and economic disparities that we see.
Well, health inequalities, let me deal with health inequalities separately. The first part of the question was really how we make some of this stuff stick, I think. It's how do we overcome variations we see across the country? So how do we achieve consistency, I guess? Yes. Do you know, I'm not so sure that it matters that much. I think, I mean, I've always, as you say, I've always been a fan of best practice, and best practice often starts, you know, in one little area, and then it grows. And I just detect that the NHS is hungrier for best practice and sharing best practice than it's ever been. I mean, certainly with the academy, we've seen the number of people who want to share their stuff go up, gone through the roof. And if you look at we're running a campaign called No Going Back, and it's stuff full of things that people want to share. And we get the stats from the website, and we know what people look and what they search for and what they're interested in. And people really are interested in sharing best practice in a way that I haven't seen before. So I think that the it's the mood and the kind of flow of the way the wind is blowing through the NHS at the moment. There is an appetite for sharing best practice, and yes, there will be differences in practice, and there will be some people doing good stuff and some people not doing not so good stuff. But I think in very short order, once we can kind of focus on the outcome of COVID, then we will see a lot of best practice just flood through the system. But there is one thing I would like to say, if I may, and that is there's been so much good stuff going on. It's very important we don't forget about it. So what I'm kind of banging the drum for now is the idea of COVID custodians. I think all hospitals should have COVID custodians. I think it should be led by a non-executive on the board. And I think every department should have a COVID custodian. The idea being that they look at the department and they say, okay, what did we do different during COVID? And what can we collect and remember? Because not all of it will be suitable for taking forward, but there'll be bits of it, and we'll be able to take this bit of good practice with that and put it together, and we have a new idea and a new innovation. So what I'm saying is we need COVID custodians to make sure we don't forget, we don't leave any good idea behind, we remember it. And then when the organization is QIing and when it's starting to look at innovation and how it wants to take things forward, we've got a memory. We've got an organization with a memory for the good things that we did during COVID. The role of the COVID custodian, starting with the board and through the departments, everywhere we go, there should be a COVID custodian to say, well, let's make a note of that, let's remember that, and let's see how that all rolls in. And then the important thing will be for each department to say to the next department, this is our list of COVID good stuff. And they'll say, this is our list of COVID good stuff. Let's put the two together and see what we can get out of this for the whole organization. So COVID custodians are really very important. As far as health inequalities are concerned, John, I mean, that is part of the Prime Minister's levelling up program.
Yeah, quite so.
And we'll have to see what he does. I mean, the way that you level up is through education, is through the tax structure, through a benefit structure that works. And I think I said education. So those are the sort of three pillars of moving that. But of course, it's not short term. And the reasons often governments have not tried to deal with health inequalities is it takes longer than the 5-year parliament for it to happen. But now I am more optimistic, and I tell you why, and that's because suddenly public health professionals have suddenly come into their own. You know, I go back to the days when I had a public health advisor on my board when I was running District Health Authority, and I was never really sure what he did. He was a lovely guy, but I didn't really understand what he did. Now, of course, everybody is an epidemiologist. Nobody can spell it, but everybody's an epidemiologist, and everybody realizes the value of public health. So they've really come into their own.
And there's if I may interrupt, there's a big data angle to this as well. You know, if you want to solve inequality, you've got to have the data to be able to see where that exists, and from that interpret why it exists, so you can do something about it. And the public health people are perfectly placed to be at the vanguard of that.
You're absolutely right, and of course you're doing some work with Johnny Pearson Stoddard, aren't you, through the institute? Johnny's a great friend of the institute, and he's a leading thinker on all of these issues, a public health consultant. And if you get a chance to hear him speak or read anything he's written, he's really good.
there we are. Okay. Oh, David says he likes the custodians idea.
Well, David, you've got to be one, and I want you to write to me and tell me how you're getting on. I
Yeah.
know who you are now, David. I'll be chasing
And there's one really important facet of all of this, which is, you know, we are here to talk about the Our Time for You virtual well-being festival. And I think that, is it fair to say, Roy, that actually, all right, we've been forced to look at workforce well-being more forensically and more determinedly than ever before. But actually, I have a funny feeling that over the coming years, workforce well-being will retain that importance in health and social care. I don't think that one is going to be let slip very easily.
No, I'm sure you're right, John. And I mean, what is so good about this event and what's attached to it is, I think the NHS is prepared to say, do you know what? There are some things that we have not done well. How can we pool our resources and find better ways of doing it? I think that first psychological step for the organization to accept the fact that there are better ways of doing the stuff they've been doing for years is the mark of a really good organization, an organization that is properly led, and an organization that doesn't have an arrogance. They're saying, we're not sure we've done a lot of this stuff right. So I think that, you know, I think that's a really important psychological step for the organization to take, and that cascades through the organization into people's mindsets to say, do you know what, this isn't right, we need to get this sorted.
Good. Okay, well, look, we've got just a couple of minutes left. If anybody would like to unmute and be brave enough to ask a final question, then feel free to do so. While you determine that, can I just repoint all of you at the Institute of Health and Social Care Management's Workforce Wellbeing Guide? It's not a report or anything of that nature. It is a guide written by members, for members, with an absolutely a plethora of really useful practical things that other places have done, and they've had measurably positive impact. So do please go and have a look at that. It's on the IHM website. You will find it if you go there. If you haven't yet joined the Institute, well, St Helens and Knowsley is our regional hub for the Northwest. So that means you all get free membership of the Institute without personal cost. If you haven't yet joined, do go on the website or speak to your HR OD teams. David Brewster's very good for this. Kim Hughes is very good for this. They will tell you exactly how you can enroll without personal cost. But if nobody's got any more questions, we are kind of at the limit of our time. So Roy, can I say to you, thank you so much for your insights, your candor. It's always very refreshing to get original thinking expressed in a sensible and forthright manner, and you've done that wonderfully well. So thank you. Thank you, all of you in the audience who've come along. We have recorded most of that. We didn't press record right at the beginning, but after about 10 minutes, I got a very stern warning from Claire that I should press the record button. So I've done that, Claire, you got the bulk of it. And I'm sure other people who weren't able to be here this evening will enjoy hearing some of Roy's observations. But that's it from us. So thanks so much for listening in. Can we say to all of you at St Helens and Knowsley and your wider health and social care community, thank you for the fantastic work that you've all been doing. I know it's been very, very, very tough, but I think you have our utmost respect, and you deserve our thank you for many, many years to come, I suspect. So that's all I'm going to say. Have a great evening. Stay safe, stay strong, and thank you all for the brilliant work that you're doing. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.